Welcome to today's Illinois Extension Local Government Education webinar. We're hosting Matt Schmidt from the Illinois Office of Broadband at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to give us updates on round 2 of Connect Illinois, an infrastructure grant program aimed at increasing high-speed internet access across the state of Illinois. For sound quality, microphones will be muted, but you are all encouraged to utilize the chat space to ask any questions at any time during Matt's presentation. If you're having technical issues, please enter those questions as well or direct message me if you're having difficulties. After today's presentation, I will be sending a follow-up email to those who registered for today's session with slides and handouts and the recording. And if you know you did not register for today's session and you're just jumping on the call, you can always direct message me your email address and I'll include you in the follow-up email as well. So without further comment, I just want to say thank you, Matt, for being here today with this important information, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Well, thanks again, Nancy. I can't tell you how much I appreciate being able to partner with you and University of Illinois Extension to run these webinars. It's always smooth sailing on my end, and so thanks for that. And so a couple of things I'd just like to mention for folks. We have our notice of funding opportunity that's out there for round 2 of Connect Illinois, our broadband grant program. And so whatever I say today is intended to offer some, I guess, context and contour and bring to life what that NOFO speaks to and relating materials. But if anything I say conflicts with that, go back to what's in written form. And so I'm going to do my best to stick to what we've laid out in our NOFO and the relating materials and actually create clarity and not confusion. But I just want to direct folks, if there are any questions, go back to that kind of foundational material. That being said, really would like to keep this informal and accessible. I've got a lot of information to share with folks today. We had an introductory kind of round 2 webinar about 6 weeks back when we announced this second round NOFO and posted the notice of funding opportunity initially. But since then, we've been able to put forward our application packet. It's actually in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 gets at the scoring criteria and categories. And then part 2 speaks more to the application itself and offers essentially a template for applicants. And so throughout this process, we've tried to stick as closely as possible to the approaches that we took for round 1, which we consider to be a very successful funding round, both in terms of the quality of the applicants we received and the non-state match and just the great good it's going to do in every corner of Illinois. That being said, we've been really upfront about wanting to make this an iterative process where we evolve from round to round to really up our game and try to get to a point where we are, giving our applicants the best resources, making this as relatively user-friendly as possible, and also just streamlining this process and making it better from round to round. And so you will see some changes, but they're all intended for those purposes to make improvements. And so with that said, I think we'll dive into this. I wanted to start out here by just reviewing a couple of pieces that we shared with folks last time. And as I always do, I like to direct folks to the Connect Illinois website, just because that's our best way of communicating with stakeholders around Illinois on what we're up to, what sorts of opportunities are out there, how to get in touch with us. And so we try to make that kind of a one-stop shop for broadband. Obviously, if there are any questions, I'm going to say this a few times today, but we're best reached at broadband@illinois.gov. We check that quite regularly and try to get back to folks in short order if there are any questions about any aspect of what we're doing. But that said, wanted to take this opportunity to point folks in the direction of our Connect Illinois webpage. You'll see this vertical menu at the right, a lot of information. You scroll down, you'll see more information regarding our digital equity grants, which if you're joining this call today to talk about our digital equity programming, we'll discuss that on another webinar. And we've already had a couple of webinars regarding digital equity programming, but today's focus is on round 2 of our broadband grant program, the infrastructure piece, the Connect Illinois broadband grant program itself. And so as you scroll down that menu to the right, you'll see broadband grants. You'll have a summary of round 1 projects, also our round 2 NOFO, notice of funding opportunity. And then we also have our round 2 application packets in 2 parts, 1 and 2 posted there. And if folks are interested in more information on our Fed Accelerator framework that we'll speak to, there's also a direct link to that framework in the related approach there. And you scroll down, you'll have access to past webinars as well. And so again, we try to put as much information on this website as we can. And again, if there's ever any feedback on what we're sharing here, never hesitate to get in touch with us. All right, so moving on, I wanted to emphasize that, so we have mapping. It's based upon FCC data. We're updating this mapping, and it should be updated, could be later today, certainly next week, regarding the recent December 2019 data. And so it's going to be updated relative to what's currently in our mapping. This mapping is far from perfect, and we really use it to start the conversation about where broadband infrastructure is and is not in Illinois. I don't want anybody to look at this map and say, oh, geez, it shows that my part of the state is covered. We don't apply for grants. No, we can have a conversation about better understanding where service is and where it is not, and how to make this grant program work for you, even if the map indicates that your area is not eligible for funding. And so in this case, the dark blue areas would be those areas that the FCC considers to have at least 100 megabits per second down, 20 megabits per second up service, quote unquote served territory in Illinois. But this map, again, it overstates service. It's not perfect. We are in the process of getting better, more granular, accurate mapping. We have a vendor, Connected Nation, doing that work for us, but that mapping is not going to be available until likely February or March of the new year. And so we will be relying upon FCC data. It just will be updated based upon what you're seeing here today. And so if any questions about mapping or eligibility, don't hesitate to ask about that. I think that's probably good to do that on the front end of this application period rather than waiting, too deep into the new year. And so I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the mapping. It's a start of a conversation. It's certainly not the final word. And so if you go back to that screen that we had just shared at the Connect Illinois website, and you click on the NOFO link, it'll take you to the actual NOFO itself, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You scroll down on that NOFO, you'll see a lot of information. The NOFO itself is the link, Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, NOFO at the bottom here. We also will have the application packets as well as the uniform budget, a very simple, straightforward uniform application that the Department of Commerce Economic Opportunity requires of all grantees, as well as some mandatory disclosure forms as well. And so links to those will be included at this website here with the NOFO. That's where you go to get that information. And so it is all housed in one spot. I also wanted to take a moment to flag this for potential grantees. There are requirements that the state of Illinois imposes on all grantees that tie to the Federal Code of Regulations, or the, in this case, Chapter 200. And we have these outlined here today. This could influence decisions that applicants make regarding procuring consulting services or engineering services ahead of getting a grant. And because our grants can cover some of those costs, we want to flag this for applicants' attention right now, that if you're in the point right where you're considering partnering with a consultant or having some engineering work done or what have you, take a look at the Code of Federal Regulations in Chapter 200. And we have this referenced here. We'd be happy to follow up with more specific information if need be. But familiarize yourself with this, because it's better to be, to put yourself in a position to anticipate these requirements before making any decisions than going back after the fact. And so we just wanted to flag this for potential applicants' attention. We likely will have a webinar devoted specifically to this and related issues, such as other state requirements, just so all of our applicants have a real firm understanding of the requirements that need to be met in order, or at least considered, in order to receive a grant from the state of Illinois. And so wanted to flag that for folks' attention today. Check that out sooner rather than later. We think it would be helpful for potential applicants. Now, as we head back to our Connect Illinois website here, this is I guess a point of departure for us. I'd like to share with our folks today on the webinar the actual round 2 application packet. And so I'm going to share another screen here with you as we move in that direction. And what this packet seeks to do is provide a little bit more information regarding our uh, scoring criteria, as well as the scoring categories that we have in round two. All right. And so hopefully everybody can see on your screens here the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Application Packet. This is part one. It speaks to the selection criteria and scoring categories as I had mentioned. And the idea here is that we want to give our applicants as much information up front as possible to understand how to take advantage of Illinois' truly historic investment in broadband. $400 million in the Connect Illinois program. By way of review, we have $50 million devoted to round one. We have a similar $50 million devoted for round two here. The application window opened formally on December 1st, closes on March 1st of 2021. And so now is a great time to be thinking about areas that you'd like to focus on, partnerships that you'd like to put together, ways in which you're able to take into consideration the selection criteria, the scoring categories to put forward a competitive application. And so part one here, I'm not going to read this, so that's to your benefit. But one thing that we wanted to emphasize here is our project categories in round two. And very similar to round one, we have broadband access that's focused specifically on new or upgraded broadband connections to homes, businesses, community anchor institutions in unserved or underserved areas of the state. And so essentially, those are areas that are demonstrably below that 100 by 20 megabit per second threshold. And again, that map that we had pointed to earlier, that's the start of that conversation. Certainly willing to entertain consideration of areas that may be overstated in terms of their service on that map. We're creating a new category here in round two called the broadband equity category that recognizes that a lot of Illinois is hard to serve for one reason or another. There's a reason that map is not filled in now. And it might be because there's particularly rural areas, like the most rural of the rural, where project economics might not support the requisite 50% match that we have in our program. And for that reason, we created the broadband equity category. If there's a really rural area where that 50% requisite match doesn't make sense, or areas where there's a history of low adoption rates, poverty, high unemployment, we want to take those factors into account so that the 50% non-state match that's required of all applicants in round one, we'll take another look at that. And that's not necessarily going to be a hard and fast 50% requirement. But what we're asking for is that applicants who choose the broadband equity category, you have to make a very strong case as to why that 50% non-state match requirement should be relaxed, and not necessarily in full, but in part for those areas. And so we our related application template provides some guidance on how best to do that. But the whole point here is we recognize that, that our Connect Illinois competitive matching grant program, as great as it is, and as hopeful we are to turn $400 million of state commitment to broadband network expansion into $1 billion plus of total investment through the matching element of this, leveraging non-state dollars. There are some areas where that 50% requirement just isn't practicable. So we have the broadband equity category. I want to take a moment to explain that because that's a change from round one to round two. Similar to round one, we have broadband innovation category that seeks to make new or improved connections to areas in Illinois, but it also focuses on related applications such as in telehealth or remote learning or precision ag. The point is, we want to emphasize ways in which we're able to leverage new connectivity for additional innovation or economic development. And so we have the broadband innovation category. And the fourth category, urban broadband, this is reserved for areas of Illinois where there's populations of 75,000 residents or more. So we have these four categories for a reason. We want to be able to make apples to apples comparisons from potential applications that come to us. And we also want to inspire innovative thinking among our potential applicants. And so this isn't a one-size-fits-all program. We want to see innovative thinking at the local level among our potential applicants. And so we have these 4 categories. And as you'll see, if we have time to get deep into the application packet part 2 today, how an applicant would go about sharing that information.
Matt, why don't
And so
you,
moving on,
can you hear me?
I sure can.
We might have a few issues. I've seen some comments in the chat box about people not seeing the slide that you're on. They still see slide 7 and they see it in the PowerPoint mode instead of the full screen mode. Didn't know if you could go to from current slide on the, I do see your mouse. So if you want to click on from current slide there, and we'll see if you are on the correct slide. So something from what we see on our end. Several people saying they don't see the application or they don't see the current slide. Looks like your screen might be frozen. Did you want to try to stop sharing and reshare again?
Nancy, is this better for folks?
Yeah, so this is, I think, what they wanted to see. Yeah, it was stuck on slide 7, so I'm not for sure.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And I just want to remind everyone they're going to get the materials in a follow-up email, but please continue. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Nancy, and thank you everybody for speaking up. And so what I'm walking through here is I had mentioned the Connecting Illinois Broadband Grant Application Packet, Part 1, selection criteria and scoring categories. And basically, I've spent a lot of time getting down to this first page, talking about those 4 distinct categories. So you didn't miss much by way of visual, but nonetheless, apologies for that. And so as we move into the selection criteria scoring categories themselves, we have very similar categories relative to round 1. Demonstrate new or improved connections you're making with businesses, community anchor institutions, the socioeconomic development impact. So talking a little bit about those related applications or how to spur on economic development or new uses in broadband. And then also focusing to the level of economic distress in targeted areas. You know, if there's a lot to be gained by an investment in a particular area on a number of fronts, we invite our applicants to speak to that in their applications. And so out of 200 points, that's 36, so 18%. Doing the quick math here on a Friday. The next category we have non-state match and demonstration of need. Again, this is a, by definition, a matching grant program. So we do want to leverage as many non-state dollars as we possibly can to turn, in aggregate, at least every dollar of Connect Illinois funding into $2 or more of total broadband investment in aggregate. And so we do ask for a demonstration of non-state match, financial need, and the extent to which the budget is cost effective and detailed. And so related scoring with that category. Moving down, community support. This is a program that we really want to see grounded in community involvement, community broadband vision, making those strong connections to local leadership and broadband investment. And so in this program, we mentioned this in our last webinar, that we accept applications from a variety of applicants, whether they're providers, you can have a rural co-op, you can have a nonprofit, you can have a community itself, or a partnership thereof. The point is we want all of our applicants and applications to reflect that community vision to the extent possible. And so that's something that we're going to emphasize more here in round 2, is just making sure that that community voice comes through one way or another in the applications. And then we get into a couple of additional categories here regarding project readiness, project viability, and sustainability. This really gets at the point, we want to make sure that the projects that we're investing in are going to solve this problem for the long haul, that they are poised to make a big difference in short order, and that there will be cascade of benefits not only to those communities, but to the state of Illinois over the long haul. And so we have a detailed approach of getting at the extent to which a project or an application is ready, it's viable, it's sustainable. And in the next category, affordability and adoption assistance, we really take seriously the idea of looking at broadband holistically And that map I shared with you, it's not the end of the conversation, rather it's the beginning of the conversation. We take affordability and adoption into account. That's a really big part of what we're trying to promote here, not just having the infrastructure in place, but making sure that, that folks around the state have an opportunity to benefit from that infrastructure, adopt, utilize the internet to full end. And so we built in scoring that reflects that. And then finally, open access, shared use, and business strategy. The idea here is we want to be strategic with the investments that we're making. We recognize that there are, broadband assets already in the ground throughout Illinois, that there are opportunities for us to leverage new broadband assets in ways that go beyond simply connecting to a given footprint or project area. And so we want to try to create incentives for that kind of collaboration, whether it's public or private or among providers or communities, making sure that we're doing what we can to promote that kind of collaboration. All right, and then moving on here, this gets in the weeds a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each one of these, just flagging for your attention, and we certainly can come back if there are questions. But this application packet part 1 that gets at the scoring categories and criteria, focuses in more detail upon the sorts of things we're looking for an application that's strong relative to project impact. And so you see the broadband access, the equity of that's involved in the project, innovation, urban broadband. Those 4 categories, we have some specific bullets that match each of those categories that speak to what a competitive application would look like. For all applications, we're really interested in making sure that we're getting new or improved broadband connections to parts of Illinois that are underserved. And so we do have a scoring table set up on the left, a number of new passes or improved passes, and along the top, the speed now versus the speed after the build. So basically the degree of broadband improvement. And so in this category, you can see how the points are distributed up to 24. If you go from area of significant need to an area of significant broadband. We get into socioeconomic development. It's not just about the new connections, but it's about leveraging as much as we possibly can from that investment. So we have factors for consideration. And again, we tailor them to those 4 categories that we have established here in round 2. And then moving down, economic distress. This is something that we also take into account. We mentioned it earlier. Want to have a good understanding of the extent to which we're targeting state dollars to areas in need, not only in a broadband infrastructure front, but on an equitable basis as well. And so what was above that we just discussed there in section A, some specific information relative to those 4 categories. As we move forward, everything that we talk about here applies to all of those 4 categories on whole. And so you don't necessarily need to think about your idea or your potential application in light of the category that it would fit into at this stage, at least. And so moving forward, we talk about the non-state match and the demonstration of need. There are points tied to the degree of non-state match that's offered. So if 70% of total project costs are covered with non-state dollars that basically the applicant would be putting forward, either public or private, that are non-state in nature, a maximum of 20 points in this category would be gained. And so this does apply to all categories, but when you think of the broadband equity category, we do not require that 50% match in that category. And so it would be an apples to apples comparison for applications in that category, with the expectation that none of them would be meeting this threshold. I guess that's the one nuance to what I had said there. Otherwise, everything else beyond this is really the same for one category to the next. Demonstrating financial need, we really think that that's a key connection to the idea of how much state funding you're asking for. If you need that strong public-private partnership and the state's involved, demonstrating that would be key to being competitive in your application. Likewise, a detailed cost-effective budget. So we get into these specific areas with some guidance on how to be competitive. Again, community support. I mentioned this earlier. This is something we take really seriously, and so we want to make sure that that the community is involved. I just want to flag this note here. If we receive an application and in a community is just completely not aware, like, for instance, a city or a county that otherwise would be served in a proposed build, but they're not even aware that the application came to us, that's a real red flag. And so we really want applicants to make sure, if you're not representing a community or a city yourself, if you're a provider, for instance, making those connections and engaging the community to the extent you can on the front end, really helpful. And we think that over the long haul, it drives adoption, it makes the project more successful. And so that sort of thing can be taken into account in other categories as well. And then we get into verified financial commitment from the community. Not all communities are in a position where they can put forward local non-state match in terms of funding. But where that's possible, I think it really shows, well, there's skin in the game, that the community is invested in a literal sense of making this broadband deployment happen. It's something that we really value as well. But we understand that not all communities can do that. And so there's certainly a path forward for those applicants or communities that don't necessarily leverage local public dollars as match. Project readiness, kind of glossed over this a little bit when we were reviewing the general scoring categories. This gives more detail on what we're looking for reasonable project schedule, detailed network engineering and network map. I think the key here is that, this is a highly technical endeavor when you're talking about expanding broadband networks. And so if we were to devote any number of state dollars to this, we want to make sure that the applicant's thought through and has the chops, so to speak, to get the work done. And so I think that it's a point worth repeating here and emphasizing. If you're interested in improving broadband in your community, make sure that you're putting the partnership together so that you've got that capacity to do the work. This is a highly, like I said, technical undertaking, and our scoring really reflects the fact that we've got to be able to partner with an applicant that can get the job done and do it in a way that is going to make a world of difference for the community it serves. So moving down, leveraging existing resources and operating assets. We get at this a couple of different ways in this application. It's something that we really value. I guess I've been making this joke for a long time that, we've got to get past the idea of digging up both sides of the road and putting fiber in repeatedly, where we can share things, where we can leverage existing resources. We think that makes a lot of sense. And this also presents itself elsewhere in the scoring as well. Network capacity, scalability. We want to make these investments once. We don't want to have to go back to the same area down the road because the initial investment wasn't sufficient to meeting the needs of the future. That's why one of the requirements of our broadband investment is that all investment that we make, all deployment, is scalable to at least 100 by 100 megabit symmetrical service. If you can get to 100 by 100, you very likely can get to much greater speeds than that. And so to the extent the future needs are at the gigabit level, we want to be able to put our communities, our investments in a position to provide return over the long term. Financial sustainability is another key aspect of the scoring. We want to make sure that we're investing in projects that, again, are going to do a lot of good over a long period of time, and that there aren't any questions about that financial sustainability. Likewise, for organizational capacity and track record, we really look to either providers or partnerships that have done this kind of work that we can trust with scarce state resources. And then this kind of gets at the point about affordability and making sure that this investment is accessible on a cost basis or a price basis to all members of our communities. And so we do have a requirement for lower price service tier, at least in terms of getting the maximum points for this category. It's something we point to. And then programs to foster adoption. Again, we're getting at that question, affordability and adoption here. I take that really seriously. And then finally, open access, shared use, and business strategy. Talked a little bit about this earlier. Not going to necessarily read this off, but the point is we're going to take these pieces into account here. And we recognize that not all applicants are going to, necessarily be strong in every one of these categories. But we are looking for well-rounded, applications that come to us that do well in as many of these categories as possible. And that's why we've taken the time to offer as much detail as we can here in what we're looking for and in how we think a strong partnership can come together through this application process. And so finally, I wanted to mention a little bit on this document here regarding our Fed Accelerator framework. This is kind of a novel approach that we've undertaken, recognizing that the federal government is making big investments in broadband and that the state of Illinois is doing the same. And it's a competitive advantage of ours with the investments that we're making to put our applicants in a position to leverage those federal dollars for non-state match. The idea is here we want to maximize the federal funding that comes into Illinois for broadband deployment. We want to promote that investment so that it's fully scalable and will serve our communities over the long term. Again, we want to go into an area once and not have to go back there again. And that the extent to which we can leverage that competitive advantage of ours, that this $400 million Connect Illinois grant program, to accelerate the federal broadband deployment schedules. Sometimes they're 5 years or 6 year schedules. We'd like to make these schedules as immediate as possible. 3 years is what we expect of our Connect Illinois grantees. And for those applicants that would like to participate in our Fed Accelerator, I guess, program here, if you will, leverage federal dollars for non-state match, we expect that you're going to be accelerating your deployment schedule. Obviously, this goes without saying, if you're joining this webinar and sticking with me this long, it's really, really important that we make sure that they know, Illinoisans are left behind in this critical 21st century infrastructure. And we absolutely know that the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed that for those who were not aware prior. And so we've got to make these investments. We've got to accelerate the deployment schedules where we can and close those gaps in digital equity. And so another expectation that we have here for those applicants looking to leverage federal dollars is that they're expanding their footprint, they're adding new passes. That means new connectivity to homes, businesses, community anchor institutions. We're asking for more here, but wanted to flag this for folks. If there are any questions about our Fed Accelerator framework and what we're looking for, we'd be happy to get into the details a little bit more down the road. Otherwise, there is information on our website that speaks to this. All right, now we're going to pivot to our next document, and I'm not going to speak to this in full, but I'd like to preview this for everybody. All right. Nancy, I'm just going to ask to confirm that everybody can see the new document that I shared. It's part 2, the broadband application.
So what I see is that you're selecting the file. So you must have you must be sharing your full monitor. So if you're on a double monitor, it's possible that the document is on a different monitor.
Are we seeing this now?
Why don't you go ahead and select it?
All right.
And so if it's open, maybe drag it to the other monitor. If not, you can keep that open, but you're going to want to stop share and then go down to share screen again and find that particular file on the list of apps that you could share, applications that you can share. So you want to share the packet to PDF. You want me to, I'll go ahead and try to share it on my end. You want to stop sharing?
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
I apologize, everybody. I thought we had this trouble shot.
Yeah, it's okay.
This is the risk you take when you're sharing 3 different documents on a live webinar. And so thought through how I might be able to merge these all together and make it seamless, but I think time became a limiting factor there. So I do apologize for everyone.
So tell me if this is the one.
This is the one. And so what I'll do today is I'll just, I think, make reference to this. We're not going to run through it. I just wanted to flag it for everyone's attention. So I'm sorry I put everybody through that just now. The point is we have 2 parts of the application packet. part one that we just went through in more detail speaks to the scoring criteria and the categories of Connect Illinois Round 2. With this part two of the application packet, it's the actual application. And so as one scrolls down, you can see the reference to what a complete application includes. And so you can stop there. The broadband application itself, A, is what is included in this. And so you've got the application overview, project dashboard, an executive summary, map and location data. We have opportunities for applicants to speak to the project impact that they are proposing. Likewise, state match, community support, project readiness, viability, sustainability, affordability, and adoption assistance, and then finally the last category with open access. And so, and then also an invitation for various attachments to be included in an appendix. And so that part A there that I just overviewed, that's what's included in this application part two, application packet part two. In addition to that, there's a uniform grant application. If you scroll down a little bit more, a uniform capital budget, a conflict of interest disclosure, and then other mandatory disclosures, as well as a W-9 form that our NOFO spells out, a notice of funding opportunity spells out that an applicant will need to share with us and include in their application in order for the application to be considered whole. And so those other pieces here, the uniform grant application, the uniform budget, the disclosures, and the W-9 form, that's all pretty straightforward. And again, that is or will be posted on the NOFO site, linked straight from our website here at Connect Illinois. But the numbers 1 through 12, part of the broadband specific application that we speak of, that's what's included here in part 2 of the application packet. And we provide additional guidance for those applicants on this front so that you understand what we're getting at in more detail. And we kind of spell that out with essentially a template. And so with that said, we don't necessarily need to scroll through all of it. I just wanted to point out that that's what this is. If there are questions, we certainly can spend some time on this. But I wanted to point this out as a resource for those who are eager to put forward an application, want to understand what sorts of questions they need to be answering and how to relay that information to us in an efficient manner. And so again, the NOFO posted on the Connect Illinois website. We have the application packets, part 1 and part 2, that we went over in degrees of detail here today. And then we have some additional Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity required material that is also included in that NOFO posting. And so it sounds like a lot. It is, but we feel like, first of all, if there are any additional questions, we'd be happy to speak to them either today with the time we have remaining or down the road. And we just want to lay this out in as much, I guess, detail as we can early on so folks know how to plan accordingly. And so with that, Nancy, perhaps we can take a few moments for any questions that have emanated that aren't related to technical difficulties and making sure we're sharing the right screen. I'd be happy to address any of the material we talked about today or get into material that you may have seen on a recorded version of a previous webinar, for instance.
Sure.
With that said, I'll stop myself. Otherwise, I get in the weeds and I'll filibuster the remaining time we have here.
It's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead and paste what is being displayed here into the chat box. And then I'm going to stop sharing, Matt, so that you can be ready to share anything that you want to reiterate for folks while we're doing the Q&A. So the first question is from a participant that's voicing the need for better statistics for their grant application. And they're saying that they like what the broadband map shows and they want to showcase statistics based on the maps with the Illinois Office of Broadband because it really shows that their locality has a need. So their question is your office the best resource for getting those statistics? If not, who can they work with?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And first, I just want to emphasize that we want to be a resource to as many stakeholders in Illinois as possible, but we are a pretty lean operation with the Illinois Office of Broadband. And so we can answer questions, and certainly these webinar resources, we're going to try to do, well, Nancy, you've been great in allowing us to do them fairly regularly. And so we'd like to keep at this. In terms of gathering statistics, I think that's really going to be up to the applicant. And there's a few areas to look at. Now, of course, we have our broadband access mapping that you can zoom in. If you have a project footprint, essentially, if you're applying for grant dollars, we require you to submit maps. And so you can actually look at the maps and point to the extent of your project area that is either unserved or underserved. And that's one essentially statistic that you can point to. There's also the American Community Survey that has a lot of information regarding broadband adoption. There will be more information available. There is information available regarding broadband affordability, not to mention a whole host of socioeconomic factors, whether it's poverty or unemployment, that are part of that socioeconomic argument that you make in making a demonstration of need. And so I would point folks and potential applicants in those directions for trying to I think demonstrate your need and point to the realities of your project area. And so I think the census is just to reiterate, one starting point here in addition to the mapping that we make available.
Okay, we had one question that was whether or not a township can be an applicant or primary applicant.
Yeah, and they certainly can be. I think the key here, though, is that if you look at the scoring criteria that we just ran through, project readiness, sustainability, viability, there are a lot of points there by design that really tie into an applicant's ability to get the job done. And because this is a highly technical undertaking, you really need to have the technical chops as part of your project team and identified right away. And so we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the key personnel, but that would be required to be identified. But in the application, itself, we're asking you to point to, all right, who's on your team? And in many cases, it might be a broadband provider. In cases where it's a local community, we want to be able to point to team members that have the technical chops to do this kind of work. And so that's that. I think that's the requisite for any applicant that's out there. We do see local governments apply for and get funded in these sorts of programs. It happened in round one for Connect Illinois. We expect it to happen in round two and beyond. But we definitely have to have that demonstration of the technical capacity to do the work.
Okay, there was one concern about the site. I want to go ahead and put it up there because it looked like somebody was trying to access the application link and it bounced back to the NOFO. I'm not for sure if that was something on their end, like a user error, or if did you check it recently and does it go to the application or?
So if you look at the menu, and I won't pull it up here necessarily, but if you look at the menu at the Connect Illinois website, there is a link to the NOFO itself that should take an applicant to the NOFO. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, there's another link that you click on, and that opens up the actual the content of the notice of funding opportunity. And so we reviewed all of that process during our last webinar, and I apologize if we glossed over it today, but that's how you would actually open that NOFO. Is you'd click on the NOFO link either through our Connect Illinois website or through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities grant website. Either way, you can access that NOFO. At first click, it kind of presents an outline essentially of kind of the key information regarding the funding opportunity. You scroll to the bottom, and that's where you'll have the notice of funding content, as well as the supporting documents that will be posted there, the application packets, the uniform budget, uniform application, and the mandatory disclosures.
Thanks for answering that, Matt. And if it is helpful, I can include additional links to previous recordings, or at least the round two previous recording, if you think it's more helpful than conflicting.
Yeah, this is the balance that we're trying to strike here, is leave enough time for Q&A and also not to go over content more than necessary. But I think it might be helpful for us to review that down the road again for folks so that it's all in one spot and in one webinar. But we do have that past webinar that kind of spent a lot of time talking about that aspect of accessing this information.
Thank you. So the next question is something you might want to pull apart a little bit. Since network electronics cannot be funded with bond-backed state funds, can they be included in the total project scope and paid for with local matching funds?
Yeah, and so that's a good question. And the short answer is what we did for round one is those sorts of costs that are not bond eligible. And so this gets into the details a little bit. And so we have had material posted in round one regarding those eligible costs. What we encourage applicants to do is build that into the portion of the total project budget that was covered by the applicant above and beyond that 50% threshold, if you go beyond that 50% threshold. And so I think that's the way to get it. Those costs is that they are covered by the applicant and not by the state. And we want to give an applicant credit for that non-state contribution that that is being made accordingly. And so in the budget document, I'm sorry, the budget template, there's an opportunity for kind of spelling that out. You certainly can reference it in your application itself too. And so because these are, in quick summary, because these are bond generated dollars that are funding rounds one and round two, we do have some limitations on what we can use the funding for. And so in those cases, we encourage applicants to essentially cover it with their non-state match.
The next question is, what can community leaders do to encourage ISPs that serve our area to apply for a round two grant and advocate on the behalf of communities we serve? And I can read that again. I know I botched a little bit.
No, I think that's a great question. I think you relate it well. I think the point there is, you know, a lot of times it's easier said than done to put these partnerships together or to come up with a great, you know, applicant for a given area. There's a lot going on, a lot of investments being made, and so we recognize that. I think if you're a local government, or I mean, if you're somebody who lives in a neighborhood outside of a community and you want to have better broadband, I think the key is to try to get the attention of providers in your area in a constructive way. Engage local leaders. I mean, it could be somebody on the local council or a board. Could be your local legislator. A lot of times it helps to get local elected officials involved and start that conversation. And in the past, it was something that you typically do, you know, with maps in the room, and you would have people right there. And now it might have to be more virtual than not. But the point is, I think connecting to share your community's, you know, desire or need for better broadband is really part of square one. Even before that, I've found that it really helps for communities or neighborhoods or a collection of houses to organize on their own a little bit. And so if you're able to go around and connect with communities, neighbors, and put together essentially a list of potential customers, that really helps get the conversation started, so that, you know, the tenor of the conversation is framed on who a potential customer base could be and how to bring those customers into the service area. I think that that's a great way of starting that conversation, so that, and we know, you know, we've done some homework. We're ready to bring broadband to our area. We're ready to get people connected and signed up.
So Matt, I don't see any further questions. Oh, well, one just came through. Okay, so must network electronics be part of the local match that is above 50%, or can they be included in the initial 50% local match?
We prefer that they be included in a portion of the match that goes beyond 50%, but the answer is it can be either. And so, but that's, I think that's that balance that we're trying to strike with how to cover those costs. And so we recognize that not all projects can provide a match that is greater than 50%, and that we recognize that there's a lot that goes into a broadband deployment, not all of which is covered by bond eligible dollars. And I also had mentioned that, or I saw in the chat box, I think there was a recommendation to the individual or anyone else listening from a township level. if you have questions about, how townships can benefit from this, maybe connect with your township association or state or regional resources on that end. And so I definitely think that that's a great recommendation. We try to have as many answers to as many questions here at the Office of Broadband, but I think, some of those that might be more legal in nature relative to local units of government, I would definitely, encourage that kind of conversation with your relevant association.
So that's all for the questions that we have today. There are no other questions coming through. If you think you have maybe some lasting idea or comment to make to folks, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we're going to be closing up the webinar here in just a moment.
All right, great. Well, I certainly appreciate the chance to connect, Nancy, and thank you so much for making this happen. And we definitely appreciate people joining us today and sticking with us. And I would just say everything I mentioned here today, go back to what's written in the NOFOs, what's included in the application packet material for final word. If you do have any other questions regarding, round 2 of Connect Illinois, broadband@illinois.gov is a great way to reach us. Again, broadband@illinois.gov. And we usually try to get back to folks in short order. And otherwise, Nancy, if you'll have it, we'd love to start the new year off with some more webinar material for folks. And I think based upon what I heard today, it might make sense to revisit some of the basics with accessing the NOFO and so forth, just so it's all in one spot for people to be able to see. And so we'll try to do that and maybe get into some more of the related material with the application part 2, that actual packet form, and some of the budget material. So this isn't the end of the conversation, but we wanted to provide some additional information at this juncture just to help potential applicants in their thinking. So thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, University of Illinois Extension, and pleasure to join you all.
Thanks, Matt. I'm actually going to put one question to you again, because we received something, and so we've got somebody who wants to know if they'll receive feedback on their last application as to why they were not approved. So I'll go ahead and question to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a an offer that we made early on, and it's definitely one that we want to honor. We tried to provide feedback over the summer, and things have gotten a little busy right now. But if there is an interest in an applicant for round 1, they would like a better understanding of how to improve an application or why they didn't do necessarily as well as they'd like in round 1, we'd be happy to have that conversation. And so I know that I have a couple inquiries pending right now, and if there are any others, certainly happy to do that. We want folks to feel as though there's a path forward for them with the Office of Broadband and Connect Illinois, and we're certainly willing to provide that kind of feedback.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt. I just want to add to everybody, as they're maybe jumping off the call. We have some people that signed on a little later today, and that's fine, because we've got archives and we have recordings of all of these webinars, including today's. And you can go to go.illinois.edu/LGE archives to find those webinars. You can always email me at essery@illinois.edu as well. I'll put my email there if you need slides or access to recordings as well. And so I just wanted to add that because we had some questions about that. Otherwise, thank you again, Matt, and I hope everybody has a great weekend and good luck for the next round of applications as well.